No one wanted to give the eulogy at my grandmother's funeral. The silence in the small funeral hall felt heavier than grief itself. Before I begin, comment your age below and make sure to subscribe for more emotional stories like this one. Now, let's go back to that quiet, uncomfortable room filled with fake flowers, whispered judgments, and people pretending to care. I sat in the front row of Riverside Funeral Home, watching my family squirm like schoolchildren who'd been caught lying. We were there for one reason only, to bury my grandmother, Evelyn Walsh. But no one there wanted to pretend they were sad. To be honest, most of us were relieved. Evelyn Walsh had lived to 84, and for most of those years, she had made everyone around her miserable. She wasn't just difficult, she was cruel. She used her money and her sharp tongue like weapons. She had the power to make people feel small, worthless, and desperate for her approval. She could lift you up one day and destroy you the next, all depending on her mood. I'm Nathan Walsh, 28 years old, a high school English teacher, and her forgotten grandson. While my cousins and relatives fought over her attention and approval, hoping to earn a piece of her inheritance, I kept my distance. Not because I thought I was above them, but because I had learned early that getting close to Evelyn Walsh always meant getting hurt. She knew how to find the softest part of your heart and crush it with a single comment. My cousin Derek had always struggled with his weight, and even now, years later, he still flinched whenever someone mentioned food because of the cruel jokes she made about him at every dinner table. My cousin Sarah had dreamed of becoming an artist, but one Christmas, Evelyn had spent the whole evening explaining why artists ended up broke and miserable. By the end of that night, Sarah had packed away her paints forever. Evelyn's words were like poison wrapped in perfume, always cutting, never forgotten. But here's what made her cruelty more complicated. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. She used it to control everyone. She dangled her money like bait, making it clear that her fortune would go only to the person who pleased her the most. It turned family gatherings into competitions. People smiled when they wanted to scream. Every joke, every compliment, every visit had an agenda. Everyone wanted something from her. Everyone except me. I stopped playing that game a long time ago. While the others performed for her approval, I simply visited her from time to time. I'd sit in her formal living room, surrounded by antique furniture and silence, and listen while she complained about everything, her children, the neighbors, the news, even the flowers outside her window. I wasn't afraid to disagree with her sometimes, but mostly, I just listened. Once, she looked at me with her sharp gray eyes and said, "You're the only one who doesn't want anything from me." I didn't know if that was meant as a compliment or a warning. Now she was gone. And as we sat staring at her casket, surrounded by lilies no one had sent out of love, I realized something: even in death, she still made people uncomfortable. The funeral director, a nervous man named Mr. Peterson, kept glancing around the room, clearly panicking because no one had volunteered to speak. "Surely someone would like to share a few words about Mrs. Walsh," he said, his voice echoing through the silence. No one moved. My Uncle Robert stared at his shoes as if they held the answers to life. My Aunt Margaret scrolled on her phone, pretending to be busy. My cousins all avoided eye contact, pretending to be fascinated by the floral arrangements. It was humiliating. Even the guests, mostly old neighbors and a few church members, started whispering to each other, probably wondering what kind of woman dies without a single person willing to say something kind. After a long, painful pause, Uncle Robert finally cleared his throat and mumbled, "She was a very strong woman." "Strong-willed," Aunt Margaret corrected, a little too quickly, and even that sounded like a stretch. The silence returned, heavier than before. Mr. Peterson shifted awkwardly and tried again. "Anyone else? Maybe a memory? A story?" Still nothing. He looked around helplessly, probably wondering if he should just end the service early. And that's when I felt something in me stir. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was pity. Maybe I just couldn't stand the silence anymore. Whatever it was, I heard my own voice say, "I'll do it." Every head in the room turned toward me in shock. My uncle looked confused. My cousin Derek whispered my name like he was afraid I'd lost my mind. Aunt Margaret leaned toward me and whispered, "Nathan, you don't have to." "It's fine," I said, standing up. Someone should say something. My heart was pounding as I walked toward the podium. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. I had no speech prepared, no idea what I was going to say. All I knew was that someone had to speak, even if the words weren't true. I stood there behind the lectern, looking out at the small crowd of people, and took a deep breath. I couldn't tell the truth, that Evelyn Walsh had been a manipulative woman who hurt everyone she loved. But I couldn't just stand there in silence either. So, I did something I had never done before. I lied. Completely, beautifully, and convincingly. My grandmother, Evelyn Walsh, I began, was a woman who taught me that love comes in many forms. I saw my cousin Sarah's eyebrows rise in disbelief. Love from Grandma Evelyn? That was new. But I continued. When I was a child, she used to invite me into her kitchen on Sunday afternoons to bake her famous apple pie. She told me the secret ingredient wasn't in the recipe, it was in the heart you put into it. The truth? She had never once baked a pie in her life. I doubted she even knew where her mixing bowls were kept. Still, I kept going. She used to tell me stories about her childhood during the Depression. How her family, even when they had little, always found ways to help neighbors who had less. Another lie. Evelyn had grown up rich and had never helped anyone who didn't benefit her in return. She taught me that real strength isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, I said, glancing at my Uncle Robert, but being the one others can rely on when life falls apart. I didn't plan these words, they just came. And as I spoke, something strange began to happen. People started nodding. A few of the older guests wiped tears from their eyes. Even my own family looked moved, as if they wanted to believe this version of Evelyn Walsh. She had a way of seeing potential in people that they couldn't see in themselves, I continued. She pushed us to be better, not because she wanted control, but because she believed in us. It was probably the biggest lie of all, but the faces in front of me softened. People wanted to believe in the possibility of kindness. Even when it wasn't true. The last conversation I had with her, I said, she told me that the most important thing in life isn't what you own, but what you give away. That kindness is the only real currency and that the richest people are those who make others feel valued. As those words left my mouth, I could almost hear her ghost scoffing. Evelyn Walsh, talking about kindness, that was comedy. But I could see people in the room leaning forward, drawn in. They wanted this story. They needed it. My grandmother wasn't always easy to understand, I said finally. She had high standards and a strong will. But beneath that hard exterior was a woman who cared deeply for her family and her community. I paused and looked down at the casket. I imagined her lying inside, probably rolling her eyes at the saint I was describing. She taught me, I said softly, that sometimes the people who are hardest to love are the ones who need love the most. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment, then came the sound of clapping. Actual applause. My aunt was crying. My cousins were nodding. Even Mr. Peterson looked relieved. For the first time, I had given Evelyn something she had never given anyone else, the benefit of the doubt. I returned to my seat feeling a strange mix of guilt and peace. I had lied through my teeth, but somehow, I had given her a dignity she hadn't earned. Maybe that was my final gift to her. The rest of the service passed in a blur. We sang hymns she probably never liked, listened to prayers about mercy and forgiveness she never practiced, and finally walked outside to watch her casket being lowered into the ground. The air smelled of wet grass and flowers, and for the first time, I felt something close to closure. Not sadness, not joy, just quiet. It was over. She was gone. And all the pain she caused had been buried with her. After the burial, as people started to leave, a man in a dark suit approached me. He looked to be in his early 60s, with silver hair and an expensive smile. "Mr. Walsh," he said, holding out his hand. "I'm Richard Hartwell, your grandmother's attorney." I shook his hand, still dazed from the service. "Oh," I said. "Nice to meet you." He smiled warmly. "That was a beautiful eulogy," he said. "Very creative." I felt a rush of embarrassment. "Thank you. I just thought someone should say something nice about her." His smile widened slightly. "Indeed. In fact, I was hoping to speak with you privately. There are some matters regarding your grandmother's estate that I need to discuss." I frowned. "With me?" "Yes," he said calmly. "Specifically with you. Could you come by my office tomorrow morning at 10? I nodded, still confused. Why would her lawyer want to talk to me? I wasn't close to her. I wasn't even in her will, or so I thought. That night, I lay in bed replaying everything. The funeral. The lies I had told. The strange way her lawyer had looked at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something about that day wasn't over yet. And as I closed my eyes, I heard my grandmother's voice echoing in my memory, cold and sharp as ever, "You're the only one who doesn't want anything from me." But maybe, just maybe, that was about to change. The next morning, I drove across town to meet Mr. Hartwell, my grandmother's lawyer. The city felt unusually quiet that day, the kind of gray silence that follows a storm. I parked outside a tall brick building with polished windows that reflected the morning sun. A golden plaque by the door read Hartwell and Associates, Estate and Trust Law. Inside, the air smelled like old books and furniture polish. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with neatly pinned hair, looked up and smiled when I told her my name. "Mr. Walsh, he's expecting you. Please, have a seat." As I waited, my mind replayed yesterday's funeral. The awkward silence. The lies I had told. The applause that still echoed faintly in my ears. For years, I had stayed away from family drama, yet now, somehow, I was right in the center of it. After a few minutes, the office door opened, and Mr. Hartwell appeared, dressed sharply as before. "Ah, Mr. Walsh," he said warmly. "Come in, please." His office was exactly what I expected from a man who handled old money: large oak desk, shelves full of law books, a globe in the corner, and leather chairs that looked like they belonged in a gentleman's club. He gestured for me to sit, and I did, trying not to look nervous. "First of all," he began, "I want to thank you for coming in so quickly. Your grandmother left behind a very detailed will, and there's something rather unusual about it." I nodded slowly, unsure what to say. "Unusual how?" He leaned back slightly, folding his hands. "Well, to put it simply, your grandmother has left her entire estate to you." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "All of it," he said. "The house on Elm Street, her investment accounts, her personal savings, everything. The total value of the estate, after taxes, is approximately $2 million. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air had vanished from the room. My grandmother, the same woman who once said I'd never amount to anything, had left me everything? There must be some mistake, I said quietly. She didn't even like me. My Uncle Robert, my Aunt Margaret, they're the ones who always tried to please her. I barely visited. Mr. Hartwell smiled slightly, as if he'd expected that reaction. She was very aware of that. In fact, that was precisely why she made this decision. I blinked. I don't understand. Your grandmother, he said slowly, was a complex woman, Mr. Walsh. Difficult, yes, but also deliberate. For the last 20 years, she conducted what she called character tests on her family members. She wanted to see who among them truly cared about her, who would show kindness without expecting anything in return. I leaned forward, confused and a little uneasy. Character tests? Yes. You see, she believed that most people were motivated by self-interest. She tested your uncle by denying him financial help when his business was struggling. She tested your aunt by refusing to pay for her children's college tuition. She tested your cousins in dozens of little ways, small requests, emotional moments, just to see how they'd react. And according to her notes, they all failed. I sat in silence, trying to process his words. Evelyn Walsh had always been cruel, but now it sounded like she had been cruel on purpose. Mr. Hartwell continued, his voice steady. You, however, were different. You visited her regularly, not because you wanted money, but because you cared enough to spend time with her. You listened. You treated her like a person, not a bank account. I shook my head. But I didn't even like her. I went out of obligation, because she was my grandmother. Half the time, she insulted me. It wasn't kindness, it was tolerance. He smiled softly. Perhaps. But she saw something different. She believed that kindness isn't measured by affection, it's measured by patience. You had patience with her when no one else did. That meant everything to her. I sat there, stunned. Then Mr. Hartwell opened a drawer and pulled out a white envelope sealed with wax. My name was written across it in her sharp, elegant handwriting, Nathan. My chest tightened at the sight of it. She asked that this letter be given to you only if you passed her final test, he said. My pulse quickened. Final test? He nodded. Yes. The eulogy. She predicted that no one in the family would want to speak at her funeral. She said if anyone did, and if that person chose kindness over truth, that would be the one who truly understood her. I felt my stomach twist. She knew I'd lie. She hoped you would, he said quietly. She told me, if someone can see something good in me, even if they have to imagine it, then maybe there's still goodness left in this family. I took the envelope with shaking hands. It felt heavier than paper should. I stared at my name for a moment, then carefully broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, neat, old-fashioned, and deliberate. My dear Nathan, it began. If you are reading this, it means you have passed my final test. Her words blurred for a moment as my eyes filled with tears. I took a deep breath and continued reading. It means you chose to speak kindly of me when you had every reason not to. I know I was not an easy woman to love. I know I hurt you, and others, with my words, my judgments, and my coldness. But I want you to understand why. When I was young, I learned that kindness was weakness. I learned that trust was dangerous, and that love could be taken away without warning. So, I built walls. I tested people. And when they failed, I felt justified in keeping those walls up. Your uncle failed. Your aunt failed. Your cousins failed. But you, Nathan, you didn't. I swallowed hard, reading the next lines through tears that refused to stop. You visited me even when I was unpleasant. You listened to my endless complaints. You never asked for money or favors. You treated me like a person when everyone else treated me like an obstacle. You have no idea how much that meant to me. The money I leave you is not a reward, Nathan. It's a recognition of your heart. You showed compassion when I didn't deserve it. That is rare. That is valuable. I hope you use this inheritance to live fully, to be kind, and to forgive those who have hurt you, even me. I want you to remember this: sometimes the people who are hardest to love are the ones who need love the most. Thank you for seeing something good in me, even when it wasn't there. With all my love, your grandmother, Evelyn. When I finished, I couldn't move. I just sat there, holding the letter, my vision swimming. The woman I had thought of as heartless had written words filled with regret, guilt, and something like love. Mr. Hartwell watched quietly as I folded the letter back into the envelope. She wasn't testing you to be cruel, he said softly. She was testing you because she'd been hurt too many times. She didn't know how to trust anyone. But she trusted you, Nathan. In her own strange way, she did. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. I thought she hated me. He smiled faintly. Sometimes hate looks a lot like fear. She feared everyone would leave her, so she pushed them away first. The rest of our conversation passed in a blur. Mr. Hartwell handed me a few documents, explained the legal details, and finally placed a cashier's check in front of me, $2 million, my inheritance. I left his office in silence, the envelope clutched tightly in my hand. Outside, the sunlight felt different, too bright, too real. My grandmother's letter echoed in my mind. She had tested everyone, even me, but somehow, I had passed. The thought filled me with both pride and sorrow. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my small apartment, staring at the letter on the table. I kept reading the same line over and over: the people who are hardest to love are the ones who need love the most. I thought about all those years I'd spent resenting her. All those times I dreaded visiting her house, listening to her criticisms, pretending to be patient. I realized she had noticed every moment. She'd seen me when I thought I was invisible. Over the next few days, I started seeing my grandmother's actions in a new light. Her harshness wasn't strength, it was armor. Her criticism wasn't hatred, it was fear. She had built her life around keeping people out because deep down, she was terrified of being abandoned. And ironically, that fear had made it come true. I visited her house on Elm Street the following week to begin sorting her belongings. Walking through that empty mansion felt strange. The air was heavy with the faint scent of old perfume and furniture polish. The silence pressed against me like a weight. Every corner reminded me of her: the ticking grandfather clock, the gold-framed photos, the glass cabinet of untouched china. In the study, I found her handwriting again: notes, receipts, letters she never sent. One small notebook sat open on her desk. On the first page, written in careful cursive, were 2 words: character tests. I turned the pages slowly. She had written dates, names, and results. Robert, failed. Margaret, failed. Sarah, failed. Each entry described a small act of selfishness, a moment when someone had disappointed her. Then, near the end, I saw my name. Nathan, visited without reason. Listened to my complaints. Never asked for anything. Kind. Genuine. The last line made my heart twist. Maybe there's hope yet. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at those words. My eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I just felt an ache deep inside, the ache of understanding someone too late. I closed the notebook gently and looked around her study. Everything about that room, the silence, the order, the cold perfection, reflected the woman she had been. Alone. Guarded. But behind all that control, there was something else, a quiet sadness. As I left the house, I noticed a photo on the wall by the staircase. It was of me, maybe 12 years old, at a Christmas dinner. She was in the background, looking at me, not scowling, not criticizing, just watching. And for the first time, I wondered if she had loved me all along, in her own broken way. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her letter. Every line felt like both an apology and a confession. I realized she hadn't left me money just to reward me, she'd left me a lesson. A test of my own. Would I use that money to become bitter like her, or better than her? As I drifted off to sleep, I remembered something Mr. Hartwell had said before I left his office. She told me once, Nathan, that if anyone ever passed her final test, it would mean she could finally rest. Maybe, I thought, she finally could. But as I would soon discover, Evelyn Walsh had one more secret left for me, hidden in the house she left behind. And it was a secret that would change everything I thought I knew about her, and about myself. A few days later, I went back to my grandmother's house again. The lawyer had given me the keys, and even though the property was now legally mine, stepping inside still felt strange, almost like trespassing. The house stood quiet and tall on Elm Street, its white paint faded and shutters worn from years of neglect. The lawn had grown uneven, and dry leaves covered the front steps. As I pushed open the door, the familiar creak echoed through the empty hall like a whisper from the past. The air inside smelled of old wood and perfume, the same scent that had clung to her sweaters whenever I hugged her as a child. Sunlight filtered through lace curtains, painting golden squares on the dusty floor. I stood there for a long moment, just listening to the silence. It felt like the house was waiting for me. I walked slowly through each room, my footsteps soft on the carpet. Her furniture was still in place, the velvet couch, the glass coffee table, the china cabinet filled with dishes that had never been used. Every surface looked exactly the same as it had for decades. My grandmother had never liked change. Everything had its place, and once it was there, it stayed. As I walked into her bedroom, something about the air shifted. It was colder there, heavier. The room was perfectly neat, the bed made, the pillows arranged, the curtains drawn halfway. On the nightstand sat a framed photo of me from high school, the same one she had once called unflattering. Seeing it there now made my throat tighten. I sat on the edge of her bed and opened the drawer in her nightstand. Inside were small things, a pair of reading glasses, a silver hairbrush, and a rosary. Nothing surprising. But as I reached toward the back, my fingers brushed against something hard, a small metal key. It was old and tarnished, attached to a faded blue ribbon. I turned it over in my hand. There was no label, no clue about what it opened. I looked around the room, scanning for a lock that might match. Nothing on the dresser, nothing in the closet. Then I noticed something odd near the corner of the room, a large wardrobe. I remembered it from childhood. She used to keep her coats there, and once when I tried to open it, she had sharply told me, "That's not for you." My curiosity stirred. I walked over and pulled the handles. The doors creaked open, revealing a few old coats and dresses hanging neatly in a row. I ran my hand along the back wall and felt a faint ridge, like a panel that didn't quite belong. My heart started to beat faster. I reached up, pressed gently against the edge, and the panel moved. Behind it was a small hidden compartment, just big enough for a box. Inside was a wooden chest, dark with age and sealed with a lock. My hands trembled slightly as I held up the key. It fit perfectly. When the lock clicked open, the sound echoed in the quiet room like a breath of truth escaping after years of silence. Inside the box were papers, photographs, and something wrapped in cloth. I lifted the bundle first. Inside was a gold locket, one I'd never seen before. It was engraved with the initials W on one side and the year 1959 on the other. When I opened it, I froze. Inside was a tiny photograph of a baby. And beside it, in faded handwriting, were the words, "For the one I lost." A chill ran through me. I set the locket down carefully and picked up the stack of papers. They were letters, dozens of them, all written in my grandmother's elegant script, all addressed to the same person, my dearest Anna. The postmarks were from over 50 years ago, but none of the envelopes had stamps. They had never been sent. I opened one and began to read. "My dearest Anna, not a day goes by that I don't think of you. I wish I had been stronger. I wish I had fought harder for you. But they told me it was for the best. They said I would ruin my life if I kept you. I didn't know how to argue. I was young, scared, and alone. Forgive me." My hands shook as I read the next few lines. "You would have been 10 today. I wonder if you look like me. I wonder if you like books or the ocean. I will never know. But please know that I loved you, even when the world told me not to." I stopped reading, my heart pounding. My grandmother, the cold, ruthless woman everyone feared, had lost a child. No one in the family had ever mentioned it. No one had ever spoken the name Anna. I sat there, trying to imagine Evelyn as a young woman, frightened and heartbroken, writing letters she would never send. I read another. "Sometimes I dream of you standing in the garden. You never turn around, but I know it's you. Maybe someday, when I'm gone, you'll forgive me. Maybe someone will finally see who I really was." My eyes blurred with tears. I suddenly understood something about her that I had never seen before. Her cruelty wasn't born out of power, it came from pain. She had built a wall of pride and judgment because she couldn't bear to show her grief. She had tested people because she didn't trust love anymore. She believed that if she pushed people away first, she couldn't be abandoned again. At the bottom of the box was a sealed envelope, newer than the rest. My name was written on it. My heart thudded as I opened it. "My dear Nathan," it began. "If you found this, then you know my greatest shame." Her name was Anna. She was my first daughter, born when I was 19. My parents forced me to give her up for adoption. They said a single mother would ruin the family's reputation. I never saw her again. I spent my whole life trying to fill that emptiness, but nothing ever did. I married your grandfather not out of love, but because I thought it would make the pain go away. It didn't. I became hard, bitter, angry, at the world, at myself, at everyone who reminded me of what I lost. You were the only one who ever looked at me without fear or resentment. You reminded me of the child I lost, kind eyes, gentle voice, patient heart. Maybe that's why I was hardest on you. You made me remember what I buried. Tears blurred the ink on the paper. I could barely finish reading. I never wanted anyone to find these letters, but if you did, I trust you to understand. I wasn't testing you to be cruel, Nathan. I was testing to see if there was still goodness left in our bloodline. You've proved that there is. Please forgive me for the woman I became. Tell the truth if you wish, or burn these letters if you must. But know that, deep down, I loved you more than I ever admitted. With love, Evelyn. I sat there for a long time, holding that letter against my chest. The sunlight had faded, and shadows filled the corners of the room. I could almost feel her presence, not the sharp, cold woman from my memories, but the young mother who had once written those desperate words to a baby she'd lost. I spent the next few hours reading every letter, each one more painful and beautiful than the last. They told the story of a woman who had never forgiven herself. A woman who had built an empire of loneliness around her grief. A woman who had hurt others only because she could not stop hurting herself. When I finally finished, I placed all the letters back in the box and closed it carefully. I sat there in the quiet, realizing that I had just met the real Evelyn Walsh for the first time. Later that night, I sat at her old desk and started writing in my own notebook. I didn't know why, maybe because I needed to make sense of everything. I wrote about the funeral, the eulogy, the letter, the secret. I wrote about how easy it is to judge someone without knowing their story. And as I wrote, I felt something shift inside me, a kind of peace. The next morning, I took the box of letters to the backyard. The garden was still overgrown, but the roses she had planted years ago were somehow blooming. I sat on the stone bench where she used to drink tea alone and opened the box one last time. The gold locket glinted in the sunlight. I held it in my palm and whispered, "I forgive you." For a moment, the wind stirred the leaves, and I thought I heard a faint whisper, her voice, soft this time, almost gentle. "Thank you, Nathan." I smiled through tears. I decided not to burn the letters. Instead, I locked them back in the box and buried it under the old oak tree in the garden. I marked the spot with a flat stone and carved one word into it with my pocket knife, "Forgiven." That evening, as the sun went down, I sat on the porch and thought about everything she had left me. Not just money or property, but understanding. Compassion. A lesson I would carry for the rest of my life. Over the following weeks, I began fixing the house. I cleaned, repainted, repaired the old fence, and planted new flowers. It felt like healing, not just for the house but for the family story that had been broken for so long. Each nail, each brushstroke, felt like rewriting the past in softer colors. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, I found a box of photographs wrapped in brown paper. Inside were hundreds of pictures, some of my grandmother as a young woman, others of family gatherings long before I was born. And tucked inside one of the albums was a single black and white photograph. A young woman holding a baby. On the back, written in faint pencil, were 3 words, "Me and Anna." My breath caught. It was the only picture she had ever kept of her daughter. I sat on the attic floor, staring at the image. My grandmother looked so different, softer, hopeful, full of light. I realized then that her entire life had been built around that one moment, losing that child. Every sharp word, every cold decision, every test had grown from that wound. I carefully framed the photo and placed it on the mantel downstairs beside her ashes. For the first time, the house felt warm. Weeks passed. I began visiting her grave every Sunday, just like she once said she wished someone would visit hers. I brought fresh flowers, white lilies, her favorite, and told her about my week, my students, my thoughts. It became a quiet ritual that gave me peace. One Sunday, as I sat there, I noticed an older woman a few rows away placing flowers on another grave. She looked about 70, with gentle eyes and silver hair. When our eyes met, she smiled politely, and I smiled back. A strange feeling stirred inside me, a warmth, a sense of familiarity I couldn't explain. She walked past me, paused, and looked down at the headstone that read Evelyn Walsh. "She was quite a woman, wasn't she?" she said softly. I nodded slowly. "Yes. She was." The woman hesitated, then said, "I didn't know her well. But I heard stories. I used to live near here as a child. My name's Anna." My heart stopped. She smiled kindly, unaware of the storm that her name had just set off inside me. "Well, take care," she said, and began to walk away down the path. I sat frozen, watching her go. Anna. The same name as the child my grandmother lost. Could it be possible? Was it just coincidence, or something more? I turned back to my grandmother's grave, my mind spinning. Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe it was her daughter, alive all along, unaware of who she truly was. And as the wind rustled through the trees, I felt that same whisper again, soft, almost smiling this time. Some secrets, Nathan, are meant to find their way home. I stood there, the locket warm in my hand, knowing my grandmother's story wasn't finished yet. The name Anna echoed in my mind like a whisper that refused to fade. It wasn't just a coincidence. It couldn't be. The timing, the name, the way that woman had looked at the grave, something about it felt connected. My heart was beating faster than usual as I stared down at the headstone. "Who was she, Grandma?" I murmured. "Was that your Anna?" The cemetery was quiet, the breeze gentle, carrying the faint scent of lilacs from nearby graves. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then I took a slow breath and made a decision. I had to find her, the woman named Anna. Maybe it was crazy, but something deep inside me told me that I had just seen the missing piece of my grandmother's story. The next day, I drove back to the cemetery office. It was a small building near the entrance, lined with old ledgers and framed photographs of the grounds through the years. The manager, a man in his 60s with wire glasses and a kind face, greeted me politely. "Morning," he said. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, trying to sound casual. "I was here yesterday and saw someone visiting a grave. Her name's Anna, older woman, gray hair, kind smile. I was wondering if you know who she might be." He looked thoughtful, flipping through a small notepad. "Anna, you said?" We have a few regular visitors by that name." "Do you know which grave she was visiting?" "I think it was just across from my grandmother's, Evelyn Walsh." The man nodded and scanned a chart on the wall. "That would be section D4. The grave directly across belongs to Anna Reynolds." Reynolds. The name didn't mean anything to me. I felt both relieved and disappointed. "Do you happen to know how old she is?" I asked. The man smiled faintly. "She's around 70, maybe 71. Nice lady. Comes every Sunday morning like clockwork. Always brings fresh flowers. Lost her husband a few years ago." I nodded slowly. "Thank you," I said, though my mind was racing. 71. My grandmother would have been 84. The math fit. Could she really be the same Anna, the baby my grandmother gave up all those years ago? My chest felt tight just thinking about it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the brief moment I'd seen her, the gentle voice, the warmth in her eyes, the way she had said, she was quite a woman, wasn't she? There had been no bitterness, no anger. Just quiet respect. By morning, I had made up my mind. I went back to the cemetery the next Sunday, parking near the same spot. The sun was low, casting golden light over the rows of headstones. I waited by the oak tree, pretending to check my phone. 10 minutes later, she appeared. Anna walked slowly down the gravel path, carrying a small bouquet of daisies. She knelt by her husband's grave, brushed away the leaves, and placed the flowers gently. After a few moments, she stood, turned, and once again her eyes met mine. We both smiled. "Hello again," she said kindly. "Hi," I replied. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," she said. You're visiting Evelyn again? Yes, I said softly. She was my grandmother. Anna nodded, her eyes gentle. She must have been someone special to you. I hesitated. It's complicated, I admitted. She smiled knowingly. The best stories always are. There was something about the way she said it, calm, accepting, almost familiar. I found myself wanting to talk to her, to tell her everything, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I said, would you like some coffee? There's a small cafe just across the street. She looked surprised, then nodded. That sounds lovely. We walked together down the quiet path and crossed the road to a small diner that looked like it hadn't changed since the 1960s. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and cinnamon. We sat in a booth by the window. So, she said, stirring her tea, tell me about Evelyn. I smiled faintly. You sure you want to hear about her? She laughed softly. I'm a good listener. I told her about the funeral, how no one had wanted to speak, how I had made up a story just to give her some dignity, how the lawyer had later called me and revealed that I'd inherited everything. Anna listened without interrupting, her expression calm but thoughtful. When I told her about the hidden letters, her eyes widened. She wrote letters? Dozens, I said quietly. All to someone named Anna. Her hands froze around her cup. I paused. Do you mind if I ask, were you adopted? She looked at me in silence for a long time. Her eyes, soft moments ago, now shimmered with something deeper, memory, pain, recognition. Yes, she whispered finally. I was. My birth certificate lists my mother's name as Evelyn W. No last name. The world seemed to go still. I felt my breath catch. Evelyn Walsh, I said softly. That's her. Anna pressed a hand to her chest, eyes filling with tears. Oh my God, for a long time, neither of us spoke. The hum of the diner faded into the background. The weight of decades settled between us, years of silence, secrets, and longing. She wrote about you, I said gently. She never stopped thinking about you. Anna closed her eyes, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. I always wondered, she said softly. My adoptive parents were good people, but I always felt like a piece of me was missing. I tried to find her once, when I was in my 20s, but the records were sealed. I never knew her last name. And now, she looked at me, voice trembling. She's gone. I reached across the table and touched her hand. She may be gone, but she left something for you, something that proves she never stopped loving you. Anna nodded slowly, wiping her tears. Can I see them? She asked quietly. The letters? Yes, I said. I kept them all. The next afternoon, Anna came to the house on Elm Street. As she stepped through the doorway, she looked around in awe, whispering, "It's like stepping into a memory I never had." I led her upstairs to my grandmother's bedroom. The sunlight streamed softly through the curtains, illuminating the old furniture. I handed her the wooden box I'd found hidden behind the wardrobe. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling, and when she saw the first envelope with her name on it, she began to cry. She read each letter silently, tears falling onto the paper. Sometimes she smiled faintly, other times she pressed her hand to her lips as if to keep from sobbing. When she finished, she looked up at me, eyes red but shining. She loved me, she whispered. All this time, she loved me. I nodded, my own throat tight. Yes. She did. We sat together in silence for a while, both lost in thought. It felt like the house itself had softened, as if the walls, once filled with bitterness, were finally breathing again. After a long pause, Anna looked at me. "You're her grandson," she said slowly. "That makes you my half-nephew," I said, smiling faintly. "I guess that makes us family." She smiled through her tears. "I've gone 70 years without a single blood relative. And now, suddenly, I have one." We spent the rest of the day going through old photos and memories. She recognized none of the people in the pictures, but she kept tracing her mother's face with her fingers, studying it like she was trying to memorize it. Before she left, we stood in the garden together by the oak tree where I had buried the box of letters. The stone I'd carved, forgiven, sat in the sunlight, warm to the touch. Anna knelt beside it, touched the soil gently, and whispered, "I forgive you, Mom." The wind stirred the leaves, soft and steady, almost like an answer. Over the next few months, Anna and I grew close. We met every week, sometimes for lunch, sometimes just to talk about life. She told me about her childhood, her adoption, her husband, her children. And I told her about my grandmother, the woman she never met, yet somehow always knew. One afternoon, we decided to visit the lawyer, Mr. Hartwell, together. He was stunned when I introduced her. "Anna Reynolds," he repeated, eyes wide. "You're Evelyn's daughter?" She nodded. "Apparently so." He smiled faintly. "Evelyn always said she wanted to put something right before she died. I suppose this is it." We spent an hour reviewing the will again. Legally, everything had been left to me, but I knew in my heart what needed to be done. "Half," I said. "It should go to her." Mr. Hartwell looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "It's what she would have wanted." Anna protested at first, but I insisted. "You were her first child. This was meant for you as much as it was for me." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. "Thank you, Nathan. You have no idea what this means to me." I smiled. "I think I do." As the months passed, the house transformed. Anna helped me redecorate it, blending her memories with mine. We painted the walls lighter, opened the curtains wider, filled the rooms with laughter that had been missing for decades. The cold mansion on Elm Street finally felt like a home. One summer evening, we hosted a small gathering for the remaining family, my Uncle Robert, my Aunt Margaret, my cousins. They were shocked to learn that I had inherited everything and even more shocked to meet Anna. But as the evening went on, something unexpected happened. The tension melted. For the first time in years, we sat together without arguing, without pretending, just sharing stories. Anna told them about the letters, about forgiveness, about how Evelyn had carried a lifetime of regret. My aunt cried quietly. My uncle, usually proud and distant, wiped his eyes. "I wish we'd known," he said softly. "Maybe we could have understood her better." I looked around the table, at the faces of people who had once been divided by greed and pain, now united by something simple, understanding. It felt like Evelyn's final test wasn't just for me. It was for all of us. After everyone left, Anna and I sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky was painted in soft pink and gold. She held the gold locket in her hand, the same one from the box. "She wore this when she was 19, she said. "Now I'll wear it for her." I nodded. "She'd like that." She smiled faintly. "You know, Nathan, I think she found peace because of you." I shook my head. "No," I said softly. "Because of us." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt something inside me settle, a quiet, lasting peace that came from knowing the truth. My grandmother wasn't the monster we all believed she was. She was a broken woman who had made terrible choices, yes, but she had also found redemption through love, even if it came too late. Now, when I visit her grave, I'm never alone. Anna comes with me. We bring 2 bouquets, one for Evelyn and one for the husband Anna lost. Sometimes we talk to her, tell her about the garden, the repairs, the new paint, the laughter echoing through her house again. And every time, when the wind rustles the trees, we both swear we can hear her voice, softer than ever, whispering, "Thank you." I smile every time. Because in the end, forgiveness isn't about forgetting the pain someone caused you. It's about seeing the human beneath the mistakes, the heart that was once hurt and learned to hurt others. Evelyn Walsh taught me that. Not through kindness in life, but through the truth she left behind. Her final test wasn't about money. It wasn't about who could flatter her or lie the best. It was about who could love without reward. And somehow, through all the years of silence and cruelty, love had found its way back home. Now, whenever I look at that house on Elm Street, glowing warmly against the evening sky, I think of her, not as the cruel grandmother who ruled our family with fear, but as the lonely mother who finally found forgiveness. And that, I think, was the real inheritance all along. What an incredible journey of forgiveness, family, and rediscovered love. Nathan's story reminds us that sometimes the hardest people to love are the ones who need it the most. Have you ever forgiven someone who hurt you deeply? Tell us your story in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you for watching, and remember, kindness can change even the coldest hearts.